Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. I hope this Sunday morning finds you well, in good health. It is hard to believe that this Sunday morning, this is our last Coffee and Conversation program. It's really a beautiful opportunity for us to reflect on what has been an extraordinary journey as part of our Kollel programming these past 3 to 4 months. Please God, in the coming weeks, the Kollel will continue to provide some amazing learning programs. Especially, I just wanted to make a quick note of our Women's Learning Conference, what we call the Yarchei Kallah, coming up, please God, in 2 Sundays. We're going to welcome our first guest in a moment, and his wife is going to be one of our guest presenters. Yarchei Kallah for women, all ages. Please God, you'll find it information online. You'll find it in the emails coming out this coming week. So we thank Mrs. Emma Katz for all of her efforts. As we come to the conclusion, apparently Rabbi Yossi Katz, our guest host last week, spilled the beans that even though this program is called Coffee and Conversation, I actually don't drink coffee. Right now it's chocolate milk, sometimes it's water, sometimes it's orange juice. But the real ikar has been the conversation. And the goal of this program has been to provide all of us, myself, members of our Chicago community, and beyond, chizuk. The goal has been chizuk, to just give ourselves some strength, a breath of fresh air. That's why this morning I'm outside in the backyard, and to share different perspectives on life as we go through this very unusual time, this coronavirus challenge. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should save us and give us a Yeshua right away, and refuah to all those who need it, and parnasa to everyone who's struggling. We've been striving as a kollel, and in this program in particular, to blend, to balance the ability to bring national and international talent to our community, but also to highlight some of our local Torah personalities and local resources. And we've had so many incredible guests, and we're blessed and thankful to all those who have taken the time to share it with us. We have had Gaonim, Rosh Yeshiva, Gedolei Torah, great rabbinic sages, and we've had simple Jews, Balabatim. We've had mental health professionals and volunteers and professional leaders of Chesed organizations. We've had conservative Jews, non-religious Jews, and of course, followers of our Kollel and our Torah Masorah. And we've included all of these personalities because this is not a shiur. This is not a Torah presentation, it's a conversation. And it's really a time to be together and to remember that we have an opportunity as a Jewish community to be all together. And so this morning, one of the things that we're going to focus on in our summative voice, so to speak, in our conclusion to this series, is that of Avos Yisrael and the idea of being together, Avos Habrios, and that love that we can share. And so our first guest, it's an honor to welcome this morning, Dr. Yitzchak Shechter. Can I see you? Oh, I see you. Let's see if I can hear you.
Hello.
Shalom Aleichem. Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Sure.
I'm going to call you doctor, even though as a Talmud Chacham, you would deserve a different appellation. But Dr. Shechter is the Chief Clinical Officer of something called the Achieve Behavioral Health Center, which I have to tell you from a personal standpoint it's just incredible, because this past year, a year ago, I had the opportunity to come to New York. As many of our Kollel constituents know, I took a few weeks to recharge, and the Ribbono Shel Olam, I can tell right now, after having this year, gave me this gift, as well as our lay leadership and our board, gave me this opportunity to recharge and to refocus and take a couple of weeks to develop myself a little bit. So I came to New York for a few days to meet Rabbeim and mentors, and one of my mentors said, if you're coming to New York, you have to meet this fellow, Dr. Yitzchak Shechter. I'm like, who is he? I never heard of him. I live in Chicago. What do I know? He said, you have to go meet him. So as many of you know, my cell phone is not exactly from this century, so I brought my GPS, plugged it in. I left my hotel in Englewood and I drove up to Monsey to visit with Dr. Shechter and see the incredible work that he is doing to be mirape nefashos, to assist people from literally every corner of the Jewish community of Klal Yisrael, to help them with refuas hanefesh, with mental health. You're talking over 120 staff people who are providing mental health services to every corner of the Jewish community and beyond. So it is, I know you're super, super busy. And I mentioned before, it's a husband and wife team, because your wife, Mirz Hashem, is coming to Chicago virtually to join us for a shiur for the Yarchei Kallah in 2 weeks, please God. So we thank you so much. And maybe just for those who are not familiar, tell us a little bit about what it is that you're doing in the center, and then maybe talk for a moment about the research that you've done to give people some insight into that.
Sure. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here with you. It's a pleasure to get out from Muncie to go to Chicago. Um, and it's such a beautiful thing that you're doing. And brought my coffee as well. So, Chaim, Chaim. Um, and it really was such a pleasure when you came out and we met. And Chicago is really very fortunate, Ashrechem, that you have somebody like Rabbi Brand to be able to be there, to be Marbitz Torah, and to be Marbitz Torah, and to teach and to care in the way that you do. That's very, very special. So Ashrechem, Chicago. Um, so to tell you a little bit about what we do, we have a behavioral health center that's very unique. It's actually recognized as a federal, on a federal level, what's called a certified community behavioral health center. And we're the only one of its kind serving the Frum community. And we have a very wide range of services, from therapy for young children, teenagers, adolescents, adults, etc., couples, families. In schools, we're in 50 or so schools. We consult with Rabbanim, we consult with educators. We also have intensive program. We do really see the entire range of what is out there. And we serve the entire range of the community. Certainly, we have non-Jews as well, but the Hasidic community, the Litvish, yeshiva community, as well as the Mountain Orthodox community, and people that are not affiliated with any of those. And it's a very beautiful place because we have the entire range of orthodoxy serving in their professional capacities as therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, case managers, and it's an expression of a community serving itself, serving its own, which is, of course, a very deeply Jewish religious theme. The whole idea of education or hospitals or all of these things is something that's rooted in the Jewish experience and the Jewish tradition. So Baruch Hashem, we're able to have that, and we in that context we also provide, we do research. I started a research center called ARC, Institute for Applied Research and Community Collaboration. It should be research that's applied and that is in collaboration with the community, of the community, for the community. And I've recently merged that with Achieve and started a Center for Behavioral Health Informatics to really know what's going on in this historically somewhat separate and underserved and a community. So we've done a lot of different research in a lot of different areas. Um, Key things is in many ways we're very different than the general population. And in the same way that the the Jewish community and the Orthodox Jewish community has unique characteristics, it's also uniquely different within the community. Each of the different communities is different. The Hasidic, the Yeshiva community, the more modern Orthodox community, and those three communities. Obviously, there's others, but are different. And one of the things that we're looking at is how they're different and how they're similar. And one of the things that's interesting is that, so as Rav Kook writes in Shleimus Hamidos, in the completion of Midos, of character, is to be able to express the good character without its naturally flowing negative consequence. And we see that. And that's some of the challenges. Every community can learn from each other. Just as a very, very small example. Um, in certain parts of the community, there is a greater there is a greater communal cohesion, just read Parshas Pinchas, Parshas Balak, you know, uh, and so Matovu Lecha Yaakov. So on the one hand, it's great that community is connected, but sometimes when everybody knows what's in everybody else's cholent pots, it could sometimes be a little bit too much. But at the same time, being able to uh, have strong community cohesion is very strong. And there's a lot of details on this. We have research about breast cancer genetic screenings. Um, we worked with Columbia that different communities have different issues that are keeping them from perhaps reaching out. We also have research now in COVID that we're working on. How the community context shapes your experience. Um, and when a community goes back into the world sooner, so then they say, okay, great, everything is much more open, everything is ready to go back into the world, even within the same group, different communities. There's a lot of different pieces.
It's
Right.
amazing. There's so
Yeah.
many different pieces. Maybe let's pick up, the last piece that you talked about is about research and what we can learn. Maybe we'll come to that
Yeah.
in a little bit, but maybe going
Sure.
back to the previous point and thinking about Avos Yisrael, your background is someone who went to YU and you're working in Muncie with very often with a Hasidic clientele, doesn't have the same background. Your beard is shorter, maybe the Peilach a little bit different, even though I know you like Hasidus learning, but how have you gained a new appreciation, or what is an expression of Avos Yisrael that you have seen and learned through your experience in working with these different staff members from the different communities and the different clients?
So I've really been blessed to be able to work with a very wide range of the Jewish people and to work in depth with them. And that includes from the Rebbes and the system, as well as the Pashat Yidden that are the simple Jews in different segments of the community. First of all, we have to remember that despite differences, we're all the same. We're all people, and that means a lot of things. People have the same challenges in different communities. They have different expressions, and they have different ways of uh, showing it or trying to solve it. But fundamentally, we all, to quote Henry Stack Sullivan, a famous psychologist from the 50s, the 40s, and the 50s, said we're all more human than otherwise. And despite our differences, we all have central themes of central stressors or challenges and successes. So that's true bichlal in general. And that's also true within the Jewish community, even though sometimes it can be seen different. But people are striving to solve the problems and to grow in the way that they grow. Sometimes there are differences, but those are sometimes just in particular expressions. I will say something that I've seen. So I assume most of the people that are watching this are more of what would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, the more modern Orthodox segment of the community. I might be wrong, but if that were the case, so one of the things that we see very clearly is that modern Orthodoxy has its tremendous strengths of individuality, of expressing the modern ethos of individuals expressing their potential, and an individual relationship with God is very powerful. But and and taking advantage of all the wisdom and greatness of the world and engaged in the world. And that's great. And other segments of the community look at that and say, that's fantastic. I'm not. I mean, I'm a non-practicing Belzer Chassid from several generations, but my bona fides are all from YU, etc. But yet that community, the Hasidic community, Yeshiva community, um, feels a comfort in that and appreciates that. So they're able to look at that and say, "That's great, that's great." And when you integrate that into your Torah ideals, that's a very thing they can be very appreciative of. So I've been very blessed to be able to have built this center over 20 years. Now, At the same time, when everything expresses itself, so something that I've seen in the Hasidic community is the sense of cohesion, the sense of connection that Ahavas Yisrael, like we did a study a little while ago, many years ago, that levels of homelessness or near homelessness in the Hasidic community, zero. It is at just about zero. Because if there is a member of a community, there is nothing they won't do for somebody in their community. And again, the broad from community, the broad Jewish community is like that and great tremendously. But I've seen it to such a depth that it's very, very exciting and it's very inspiring. And I think so there's a tension between these different parts that express themselves. But when we can learn from each other, that's the best. We take the best of every part of who we encounter. So that's one of it. The intense sense of communal. And again, there are downsides to it. When everybody knows what's in everybody's cholent pot, it sometimes gets stressful in a different way. So that's one thing. There's the intense sense of community and action. That there's a sense of action. I don't know what it's like in Chicago, but you know, whenever you're traveling someplace or in airports, the minyan is usually organized and is usually nusach svard. It's usually
I
Hasidic.
never complain about that, by the way, because I daven Svard. We come
Oh,
from a Hasidic town, so it's always convenient. You
right,
have a Svard minion.
right. So I think that's indicative of a action mode, a mode of action, and and so that's something they see also. The fact that this entire clinical system that we were able to be built is really in a Hasidic community. And it's under Hasidic auspices, again, professional in every sense of the word. But and there's a sense of action to community. So I think that's very special. And I also see that the thing that really brings people together is humility. When people could sit with each other on a one-to-one basis, and hear the experience and share in that experience and understand the pains and the successes, the failures, tribulations, and achievements, I think that creates that. And when people do that without a preconceived notion of, I am this, I am the right, you are other, you are something weird. And it goes on both sides of the spectrum, all sides of the spectrum, one or another. I think when approaching people from a sense of Ahavas Yisrael, which is built into a sense of anava or humility, I think that's what really builds
It's amazing.
bonds, and that is a clinical statement. That's not just a religious philosophy. That is what the nature of what psychotherapy is: connecting with another person and being there to hear them qua them as they are experiencing it. And that's
Amazing.
what Ahavas Yisrael means. That's when connecting without my pre-understanding and that's that humility. And I think that is a very powerful thing. The more we do that in the world, and we certainly need that in the world these days.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. This idea, first of all, of appreciating and respecting other communities and learning from them. And then the second point about being humble and open to connect to others on an open level of opening our heart to them. It's such a powerful message, especially for this time. Thank you for the time. Hatzlacha, continued amazing siyata d'shmai in all of your work. I look forward to seeing you soon when I can come and visit. Please, God,
Yes.
next time you're in Chicago, we'll share a Romanian hot dog together, Mirz Hashem. Thank you. Have a great day. And Tizkol Mitzvah Yasher Koach.
Thank you, and Hatzlacha to you and to everybody in Chicago.
Amen.
Well.
Amen. Thank you.
you.
Thank you, Dr. Schechter. So great to have you. So may from one mental health organizational leader to another, bringing it closer back home. Excited to welcome Mrs. Rachie Karish. Can you hear me, Rachie?
I can hear you.
I see you and hear you. Welcome. Thank you for taking the time It's a very
Thank you for having me.
it's a very busy time in your house, I suspect, on a Sunday morning. I actually went to the backyard just to ensure some more peace and quiet. I don't know what it's like in the Karish household today.
I'm
But,
currently hiding out, hoping for no interruption. So we'll
That's
see how
great.
that goes.
So hopefully those who are watching are familiar with Reichi, with the Madrigos Midwest institution, which the COLA has been blessed to partner with during this situation. We'll call it the unprecedented, the pandemic, but also before, and please God, continuing. What Madrigos does primarily for the adolescents, for the young people in our community, but for the broader community in terms of the whole family is really amazing. And I think it's just a great opportunity for us to welcome Reichi and to thank her for all that and for her service and for everything that Madrigos does. And maybe for those who aren't familiar, to take just a minute and share with people what it is that Madrigos is doing, which is actually impacting the lives on a personal level of so many families in our community.
Okay, thank you for that introduction, Rabbi Brand. So to sum up Madrigos in a nutshell, Madrigos is a not-for-profit mental health organization whose singular purpose is to just facilitate our youth into emotionally healthy adults. So we do that through an array of different programming. We do that through prevention, we do that through enrichment, and we do that through intervention. So without going into too much detail about any particular program, our primary prevention is through education. So we are in most of the Jewish day schools in Chicago with our prevention life skills curriculum, which is a curriculum that touches on literally every single social emotional topic you could hope your kids would learn about, from boundaries to leadership development to mental health, the entire spectrum of social emotional issues. We go into the schools, or the teachers are trained to be in the school, to teach our curriculum. It's a 30-week curriculum, so if the school is implementing fully, it's literally a class on the school's curriculum. And one of the main things that we preach through our curriculum is that kids should have healthy mentors and healthy outlets. So Madrigos, really wants to be a full service organization. You could come to us and get any mental health need under the sun. So we want to be able to provide those healthy mentors and healthy outlets. And that really goes into our enrichment programming, where we have the most fabulous team that runs our lounge program for us. We have basketball leagues, we have an annual retreat, and all of our programs are about providing these kids with a fun, healthy outlet, but also staffing the programs with healthy mentors for the kids to connect to.
I can tell you that my own kids have benefited both from the in-school and the out-of-school and the basketball. It's great.
Awesome. And that's our hope, is that we're touching literally everyone in the community, every sect, all along the spectrum. And then for those kids that need a little bit more help, we have a full-scale counseling center. We're on multiple insurances. We also provide sliding scale. And our goal in opening up the counseling center was really to be able to provide the community with affordable and quality therapy. So we have 12 different therapists. We are seeing a whole range of issues. We have different specialists. We have specialists in trauma. We have specialists in OCD, specialists in anxiety, literally all along the spectrum. We're seeing all these different issues and providing therapy to the preteens and teens, and even goes into the age of young adults to our community.
It's amazing. In keeping with the theme and the ideas that we're talking about this morning of Ahavas Yisrael, it's the 3 weeks and reflecting, looking around at our world. So how has it been to serve so many different segments of our Chicago Jewish community? Dr. Schechter, Yitzi Schechter, spoke about the much bigger tri-state community in New York and New Jersey, in that area. Here locally in our smaller community, we also have sub-communities, so to speak, or little different segments. And how has it been to work with these different segments? What have you learned about appreciating them?
For me, it's such a blessing. And I think that, I grew up in Skokie. I grew up going to Hillel Torah and to Ida Crown. My kids are in Ari Crown. I'm very close with a lot of people in the Beis Yaakov community. So I feel like I kind of myself span the spectrum. So to be able to service everyone, everyone in the entire community. I mean, everyone in the end of the day, wants the same exact thing. We all want our children to be healthy. We all want our children to be happy. We actually did a Madrigos video many years ago where we interviewed many different segments from the community, and we asked them, what do you want for your children? And the message, of course, was the same. Doesn't matter where you come from, what your background is, the message is the same. And so that has been probably the most one of the most rewarding things about working for Madrigos is to be able to service everyone in the community. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter what your background is, and to be able to just relate to everybody and see that everybody really wants the same thing, and we're all working for a singular purpose and a singular goal.
It's awesome. Now, what is it that people need to be aware of that the current situation has brought to the fore in terms of families? You know, something that you mentioned to me a while ago that Madrigos is uniquely relating to in this children who, lo aleinu, are in a compromised situation, being in a home environment that's not supportive for them. So how is it that this situation has affected those kids? And maybe share a little bit with everybody what Madrigos is doing to support those kids who face that very significant challenge.
Right. So it's interesting because, I've been talking to a lot of different mental health professionals, of course, throughout this whole situation. And a lot of different people have noted how their clients seem to be faring very well throughout this entire situation. And it is very true when it comes to things like anxiety. Our clients that had struggling with anxiety, so they had the coping skills already to deal with the anxiety. So they're doing pretty well throughout the situation. However, it's not true when it comes to kids that unfortunately come from homes that are abusive or dysfunctional in some way. For these kids, Yom Tovim, Shabbosim, those are the hardest times for them because those are times that they're really stuck with their family, which unfortunately is not a healthy situation. And they don't have the outside support. And, on times like Yom Tovim, when you can't even pick up the phone to call someone, right, that makes it even more difficult. So the last many months being stuck in their homes with a situation that was less than ideal has actually been extremely challenging. So Madrigos has been, obviously, just like all the therapists, we moved all our therapy sessions over to teletherapy. We've been using Zoom. For some of these clients, we've gone up to more than once a week in order to accommodate some of their needs during this time. We also added a support line. Which we opened up from 7 to 10 o'clock every single night. And it was specifically for this reason we opened it up. We felt like there were going to be a whole host of people that were not in therapy, that were coming from homes that, again, were less than ideal, from anything from less than ideal all the way down to abusive, which is the extreme of it, and that weren't able to get support through these times. And a lot of people that opened up these mental health hotlines did have a lot of calls coming in about whether it was spousal abuse or parental abuse or anything along those lines. That has been something that has been on the increase during these times because people are in these enclosed situations and really not be able to get out of their house and get their outside support in the same way.
So what is something that you've been, and the therapist, you're a social worker and the therapist have been sharing with kids who find themselves in this circumstance? What can they do? What are practical things that they can do to deal with?
Right. So it depends. Okay. So, if God forbid we're talking about abuse, so that's obviously a reportable situation. And that's something that as therapists, we're obligated to report and to get DCFS involved and make sure that the kid is not being harmed in any sort of way. If we're talking about children who are dealing with less than ideal circumstances, but it doesn't go into the abusive category. So we, first of all, we are suggesting, even when things were at this worst, getting out of your house, right? Whether you could wear your mask, you could do proper social distancing but this is true not just for people in abusive homes. Everybody needs to get out. You need to be able to take a walk. You need to be able to get fresh air. Finding supports in their lives. Who could be a support system to them in these times, right? And help them identify the support systems. Help them work on something we call radical acceptance, right? Sometimes we gotta just work on accepting our situation that we're in, but learning how to rise above it, right? How to not let the family dynamics depict who we are and who we're gonna be from it, right? I think a lot of times when we talk about forgiveness from people who've hurt you, it's not necessarily because the people who hurt you deserve forgiveness, but you deserve forgiveness in your life, and you deserve not to hold on to anger and resentment. You deserve to be able to rise above that, so that doesn't weigh you down for the rest of your life. So helping them come to terms like that, but even more importantly, identifying immediate needs, right? who are the support systems in your life? What can you do every single day? Can you take a walk? Can you listen to music? What are the different outlets you can have to help you deal with the situation that you're in? And if God forbid anything ever crosses the line to danger, like who are you going to call and how are we going to get you help immediately to make sure you're safe?
Amazing. So how do people in the community find Madrigos? How would people connect and reach out, whether they are parents or kids? Where would they go?
So you could either go to our website. We have a website, madrigosmidwest.org. You could call our phone number, 773-478-6000, or you could email us at info@madrigosmidwest.org. And we're here for, and even if you don't know what you need, right? Even if you just say like, I'm not sure if I need Madrigos, you could call with literally any need that you have. And we're happy to, if it's not us, to really help guide you in the right direction.
Amazing. Is there maybe an anecdote or two that you want to share with everybody about, on a personal level, how it is that reaching out and creating this connection can help an adolescent and can help a family? Where have you seen that it really just made that world of difference to a child that you've seen, and maybe even in retrospect have seen them grow and where they are now?
Right. Well, it's funny, with one of the first programs that we ever did through Madrigos, I think it was within the first 6 months that I started there, is we opened up for Hannah Sachs. We did Zumba dinner, or was it Zumba? I think it was Zumba dinner and discussion. And at that time, we didn't have our counseling center. We didn't have any of that going on, right? It was we were just doing some prevention. It was literally one of the first things that I did with the girls. And I became close to one of those girls, I became close to a handful of them, but one in particular I became close to that, was struggling a little bit in high school, and normal teenage stuff. 10 years later today, just this last Shabbos, that girl came over to visit me. We still have this, now she's married with children and living the most amazing, wonderful, happy life. But you build connections through these time. And by the way, this girl has a supportive family, and she has support. She had a whole supportive network. But sometimes, we can see with our own children, sometimes you don't want to talk to your parents, right? Your parents are great. You love them. You could tell them certain things, but you need a mentor. You need someone to speak to sometimes outside of your family. And so Madrigos is really able to provide these kids with these mentors. And I can't tell you how, Rivka Efron, for example, who runs our Girls High School Lounge, can't tell you how many girls stop by her house on Shabbos, want to get together with her during the week. They want someone to connect to. Our kids want someone to talk to. So even if you don't need the counseling version of Madrigos, just getting your kid involved with a healthy mentor, a healthy adult in their lives is such a huge advantage to them, and something that will service them way into their adulthood.
Amazing. Well, thank you for your service to the community, for your partnership with the Kollel, for everything you guys continue to do, and just stay well, be strong, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the summer. Hope to see you soon. Regards to Phil.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Rabbi Brand.
Thank you so much for taking the time. Rachel Karish and Madrigos, amazing, amazing work that you provide for our Chicago Jewish community. So thank you. Have a great day. Rabbi Sittner, our next guest. Can you see me? Can you hear me? I see you.
Shalom Aleichem. How are you?
Aleichem Shalom, Bruchim Abayim. Welcome back to Chicago. I don't want to say you're home away from home, but as Rabbi Sittner wears many hats, as a team leader at the Center for the Jewish Future at YU, he has been a beacon of light and a pillar of support for our Kollel over the past many years. And that's one role that he plays, but that's not what we're going to focus on today. His other role as a social worker, as a researcher, as somebody who does Gottman courses, as someone who works with mental health, Dr. Sittner is sharing with us his perspective today a little bit from some of his work. Actually, we had Dr. Yitzi Schechter on earlier, who did a lot of the research for some of the dissertation and the research that has formed some of your work. So Dr. Sittner has been working with couples and dealing with issues related to relationships for a long time. And the theme that we're thinking about this morning is one that really is related to relationships, and it has to do with connecting with others. This is the last Coffee and Conversation program. Your inbox has been, Baruch Hashem, inundated over many weeks with Kollel emails, and it's in a large measure, it's a l'chaim, and thank you to your support that we're able to succeed. So thank you for enabling us to do this. And this reflection this week, we're really focused on on relationships and Avas Yisrael, and what does it mean to connect with others and to understand others. So we had Rachel Karish now, who from our local Madrigos Midwest was talking about relationships with parents and children and adolescents, but maybe from a spousal perspective or an interpersonal perspective, what are some of the things that we can think about to nurture Ava for others, to nurture Ava for a spouse or for a community, because that's ultimately what we want to do and what we want to become. So maybe that's a place to start this conversation, thinking about Ava for others and how do we build that. So thank you for joining us and taking the time of your very busy schedule. Good morning.
Thank you, Rabbi Brand HaKohen. What a great schluss it is to be able to join you and all of our friends in the greater Chicagoland community. So I like how you're calling me Dr. Sittner. Normally it's Rabbi Sittner because I'm in the Kollel universe, working on behalf of Yeshiva University to support the wonderful fellows of the Kollel. And it really isn't a big stretch between these two hats that I wear as Rabbi Sittner and Dr. Sittner, because in my private practice, so much of what I'm focusing on is working actually exclusively working with couples. And it's all about relationships, and it's about marriage, and it's about communication. And when I sit down with the members of the Kollel and we look internally as an organization, it really is, it represents, it reflects so much of the values of what a good marriage looks like, right? How do we communicate with each other? How do we build upon respect? And you're taking people from different parts of the world who come together in a very intense environment, right? I don't even know if people realize the amount of hours that the Chevrei HaKollel are putting in on a daily basis. They're putting in more hours than there are hours in the day. Certainly, Rabbi Brand, you're doing double that. But it's an incredible environment that the Kollel has created as an incredible Makom Torah and a place to be mashpia throughout the Chicago community. But within that organism, there's this energy of how do we connect? How do we communicate? How do we relate to each other? How do we express our needs, our fears, our disappointments? And can I do that to someone that I learn with, someone that I look up to? And we have, young budding professionals who, as we've seen throughout the trajectory of the Kollel, members come into the Kollel, they spend a few years, and Baruch Hashem, to see them seed the Chicago community as rabbeim and as teachers and as rabbis. I mean, it's incredible to see that. All of that is about developing the individual to be able to have that successful trajectory. And a lot of that does come down to what was being spoken about previously, right? The idea of mental health, about being a whole person, not just about being a Talmid Chacham. If I could be successful in one specific competency in my life, that doesn't make me a successful person if it doesn't translate. And that means to be able to communicate to my wife, to my children, to my colleagues, right? And so this dynamic of successful and healthy communication is something which spans the spectrum from one's personal life very much into the professional life as well. And I think, Rabbi Brand, that's something that you and I have worked on a lot over the years.
Yeah. So maybe reflect that for the community, that idea of communication as nurturing and fostering the Ava, the positivity within a team, within a marriage, within a community. What are some of those building blocks? What does it actually look like? What are some of the components of it?
Okay, great question. So the training that I have is from my great dear mentor and friend, Dr. John Gottman, who I consider like my Rebbe. He's the world's expert when it comes to relationship. And the reason he is the world's expert is because he's, unlike other therapists where you develop a theoretical orientation around how to help people communicate and essentially stop their conflict. Dr. Gottman spent 40 years in a laboratory setting. And it was in that environment where he just observed couples. And he says, I did no intervention. I didn't help anybody. I just watched them and I watched them devolve. And through that, I was able to identify what couples do right and what they do wrong. And it's fascinating because in that research that he developed, he could now watch a couple have a 3-minute argument and make a prediction whether they're going to stay married or get divorced. And his accuracy rate is 94%. He's almost always right. What does that tell us? That there are certain fundamental things that every couple is doing. And if you do it this way, you're going to strengthen the relationship. But if you do it that way, you're going to hurt the relationship. So what I do every day with couples is I help them identify X and say, this is going to be toxic, swap it out for Y, right? And so if we could just learn what are those behaviors, what are some of the underlying pieces that cause a couple to be in that state of conflict, and really, number one, heal the conflicts so that we can communicate, but then do something far more important. And that's to go deeper beneath the surface. And when you go beneath the surface, you realize that it all comes down to one thing. And Dr. Gottman's big thing in life is it's all about the friendship. It's all about the quality of the relationship that you are going to have. It's not about, do we fight or not, right? I don't fight with my mailman. That doesn't mean that I love him, right? Not fighting is not a factor that we should think about. It's really about how much do I care about the other person. And so we look at it conceptually as a series of building blocks, that the first thing you have to do is know the other person. And to know the other person means you're willing to listen to them. If I am so full of myself and fill up the room with my needs, my thoughts, my voice, my feelings, then I'm not really hearing the other person. I'm not getting them. So if my children have needs, really core needs, children need to be nurtured. They need to be loved. And part of that means that we have to be able to draw out their needs and their feelings, because when kids don't have the vocabulary with which to express themselves, it ends up coming out in maladaptive ways. So we start to see them, quote unquote, rebelling or acting out or hurting a sibling or doing things that are not characteristic. And that's coming from a place of really wanting to just be heard. When we think about our spouse, right, our friends, the same thing. How do we create that first level of just saying, I just want to know you more. I want to hear about you. If you can figure that piece out, the next level is that you start to like the other person, because you can appreciate, even if we're oil and water, two totally different people, there's a certain respect. And that respect is what fuels the idea of saying we get along really well, right?
So that,
I don't have to get you to think like me. Go ahead.
right. So yeah, go ahead.
No, please.
So I was just going to say, so, and that is something which exists in concentric circles. Based on what I'm hearing, tell me if I'm getting this, it exists within a spousal relationship, with a family relationship, and it relates to a community relationship. That within our community, how do we get to know other people? How do we build bridges to understand them so that we can come to connect with them, even if we're not similar to them, even if we're different from them? And that trajectory, based on what you started with, may define whether this relationship or this community or whatever level we're talking about is going to be from the masters or the disasters,
Right.
as Dr. Gottman might say, right?
That's exactly right. And so every couple has, or every relationship has that opportunity to be able to say, this is more than just my perspective, right? How do I create that space to welcome you into that? And so if I know you more, I like you more, the next natural step, as Dr. Gottman describes, is something called turning toward. And in turning toward, it's where I create a space that says, I really want to pick up on what your needs are. And this is where I think in our community, we have a lot of opportunity. So every interaction between two people is something that we call a bid. You're making a bid for attention, a bid for communication, a bid for affection. It's basically saying, hello, notice me, like I'm trying to get your attention. Can you please acknowledge me? Right. So our kids do that all the time. And again, sometimes they do that by acting out, but people are looking for something. The question is, to what extent do you pick up on that? Right. And so if let's say my wife were to say one morning, oh, I'm so tired. That's a bid. What do I do with that? Right. So I have three options. I can either turn toward her, turn away from her, or worse, turn against her. What does those look like? If I were to turn against her, I might say something nasty like, well, of course you're tired. You had coffee right before bed. That was a stupid thing to do. You knew you weren't going to sleep. Right. That's throwing her under the bus. Right. So we want to make sure to really avoid those things where we're finding a negative space within us and then lashing out against somebody. The next level, more middle level, would be turning away, which is just ignoring the bid. She's saying, I'm really tired. And I just said, no, okay. And I'm not taking the time to care. The third level is what maybe we would refer to as noseh ba'olam chavero, is to show that like I really care. So when my wife says, I'm really tired, turning toward would be something like, oh, I'm sorry. Did you not sleep well? No, I didn't sleep. Why? Is something on your mind? Yeah, I've got a lot of things weighing on me. Do you want to talk about it? No, I'm okay right now, but I appreciate you asking. That suddenly turned into a conversation that we see successful couples. And as Rabbi Brand pointed out, the masters and the disasters, the two categories that Dr. Gottman refers to in the Love Lab that he had observing couples. So the disasters who ended up divorcing, 33% of the time, they would turn toward each other, which also means 2/3 of the time they did not. So a partner would make a bid and say something like, I'm really hungry. And the other partner would say, okay. Or looking at their phone and say, uh-huh, and not really pay attention. Whereas the successful couples turn toward 88% of the time, right? So we see that that's a factor of really listening and picking up on what's going on for the other person. But it really has to start with where I am. If I'm in a place where I'm shut down, or I'm only thinking about myself, my needs, my stress, my job, my responsibilities, and you make a bid and it's just going to hang in the air and it's not going to be picked up on, well, then that's where it's going to fall. And so that could happen with my children, with my wife, with my job, and with my community, right? If I hear that there's somebody in my community who's hurting, right? They're taking up a collection for someone who's in need, right? Am I turning against and say, well, of course that's what the person's suffering from because they brought it on themselves? That would be turning against. What if I were to just turn away and say, well, it's not my problem? Versus what if we turn toward and said, Noseb Olam Chaveru, it's my responsibility to meet their bid and to say, what can I do, even in the smallest way that shows that I am the type of person that's striving to be someone who cares for my fellow. And I think that idea, that marital concept from that research gives us a paradigm to be able to say we can strengthen the entire community if we each turn toward one another.
So maybe what I'm hearing, you're telling me that the premise of the relationship is actually the listening, paying attention to the other person. It's the orientation, because if I'm not attuned to the fact that that person is making a bid, that that person is addressing me, so then I'm not even going to get to first base. The presumption here is that I'm oriented toward being open to that person, listening to them and paying attention to them, that they exist.
And if we go one step even deeper than that, it's what's happening in me at the moment that you're talking and I'm supposed to be listening. Am I really truly present? Or am I thinking of, what am I going to respond to your question? What am I going to say that makes me sound smart? How can I, add to the conversation? What do I have to do later? What time is carpool? And I can have a million thoughts going through my head and I'm not truly present. And so when my head is elsewhere, I'm going to be more inclined to turn away from somebody else because I'm just not thinking about you. I'm centering myself as the primary part of the conversation rather than putting myself on hold. And that's one of the things that I teach couples to do is, how do you postpone your own agenda? I'm not saying you don't matter. I'm not saying we can't talk about what you need, but for this moment, when your partner is speaking, when you're listening to somebody else, just stop everything else. I want to listen. Can you say it again? I missed it the first time. Let me really show that I care. And what you're saying is the single most important thing in the entire world right now. And if I can just focus on that and let that sink in. And sometimes you might have to say, okay, hang on, I need a minute. Let me process that. And as Rabbi Brand demonstrated reflective listening a moment ago, to be able to say, so what I hear you saying is, so that your partner knows that you're on the same page, because they could then correct you and say, no, that's not what I said. Being on the same page starts with where you are and having that, an ayin tov, being able to see the good in the other person so that you're a kli that can then receive what the other is saying.
These are amazing. These are super, super helpful tidbits because they are practical things that we can do to nurture the ahava in our small concentric circle of our spousal relationships or our children or our friends, but also in the general community of turning toward, of honoring people's bids, of listening and really paying attention and recognizing that they are there and we should answer them. And so having that opportunity is something that we can do, especially during this time. So thank you for giving us these tools. Thank you for the time this morning, your busy schedule. Have a great week. I look forward to, we will be in touch very soon.
Thank you. Continued hatzlacha.
Amen. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Great to have you as always. And finally, our last guest, Rabbi Ari Hart. Rabbi, are you there? Can you hear us? I see you. Can I hear you? Can I hear you? Try speaking for a second because I don't know if your audio is on. It is. You there?
Yes.
Now I hear you. Welcome, Boker Tov, Bruchim Abayim. How are you this morning?
Thank God. Shalom Aleichem. Doing well. How are you?
Aleichem Shalom. Regards from down the block. Thank you for taking the time. It's actually really fitting to have you join us this morning because we're talking a lot about ahava, about love and Avas Yisrael and Ava in general. And one of the things that you've been focused on and talking about, even though I'm not on Facebook, so I don't hear, I know that's a lot of how you're messaging and teaching
Stay away.
and sharing. But, for those who don't know, Rav Ari is somebody, and he and I have had the pleasure to know each other for several years since he's come to Chicagoland, to Skokie. He's someone who cares deeply, not just about the Jewish people, but about the world, about every human being. And I think it's actually very fitting that we conclude this conversation and this entire series in reflecting on the world that we're in right now. So to take a time, a few moments to think about the challenges that we're facing as a Jewish community in terms of Avos Yisrael, but really in the world in which we live. And you've shared with me some of the interactions and the people that you've met out there, the opportunities that we have. Maybe share a little bit with those who are watching and listening about what's going on out there in the world, in the complicated environment in which we live today. What's happening out there for those who aren't necessarily with their ear to the ground?
Sure. So first of all, just I've been listening. It's been wonderful, the insights that have been shared already, and just to kol hakavod on this program and all the programming that you do. I was speaking with you a few weeks ago, just so amazed at the way you turned the kollel into this engine for Torah Online that's reaching thousands of people, including many people in my own shul who turn to you and to these programs every week and just are so grateful for it. So I'm grateful personally and on behalf of all the Balabatim who also enjoy. It's just a great asset for our community, and we're all thankful for your tireless work, and it really is tireless. Yeah, look, there's a lot happening in the world right now, and I think we're all seeing it and feeling it in different ways. I think one of the things that we talked a little bit about over the last few weeks is these issues of racism and the Jewish community and the very complex dynamics that have unfolded there. And I've been thinking obviously a lot about that recently. I think we in the Jewish people, you talked about starting with Ava for the self, and then for the community, and then for the Am, and then for the whole world. And that's Rav Kook, right? That's the 4-part song, right? Which you know well. And it's that I think they're all connected, right? If we love ourselves, then we're able to love our neighbor. And if we love our neighbor, we're able to expand our empathy and our compassion and concern, as we see and understand those around us. So I think it's all connected. And I think they're not contradictory. I think a deep love of the Jewish people and a commitment to Am Yisrael is actually, I think, a stepping stone to love for Kol Yoshvei Tevel. It's a way that we can, I think it's part of who we are, is to be concerned, Imein Ani Mili, first us, but then Imani Rak, that's Mimani. Like we have this universal impulse. And that's something which goes, back thousands of years from the Nevi'im to the civil rights movement, and Rabbi Lam Zatzal, who was writing very powerful things about race in the Jewish community in the 60s, Rabbi Berman, Moriva Rabbi, who was marching in Selma, and still today, the RCA and the OU came out very strongly with statements against racism, statements affirming that every single human being is made b'tzelem Elokim, and that's something which we all believe. And I think when you go out and you meet people and connect with people, and you can push away some of the noise and the social media and the politics and just connect with people one-on-one and hear their stories and hear what's going on, you can get a taste of that Tzelem Elokim in every human being, and you can connect to it, and you can learn a lot about people's reality and what's happening. And the reality that we're all seeing and feeling is that we're in America still dealing with racial issues that we've been dealing for a long time, and there's still a lot of work to be done. And the Jewish community has a particular and complicated piece to play in that. Yeah. I think as believers in Tzelem Elokim, as people with a tradition from the Nevi'im of prophetic justice, we have to speak out against racism and hatred and abuse. And at the same time, we know persecution, and we know victimization, and we know it in the past, and we know it today. And we have to be very careful in who we partner with. We have to be very careful in not compromising our own needs and our own particular narrative, and not selling out our narrative when engaging in these issues. So it's like a real balancing act. And that's something that I try to do, because I do think it's so important we be out there and advocating against racism and hatred. And at the same time, I think it's so important we be advocating for ourselves and protecting ourselves. And that's part of what I'm trying to do.
So maybe let's talk, we could hear from you about two aspects of that. Maybe one side of it, a little bit on the human side, to share with people who it is that you're meeting and what are those personal stories, but also unpacking a little bit, how do we deal with movements, whether it's Black Lives Matters or other, where sometimes there is a confusion or intertwining, especially in some of these personalities, where some of the messaging is about racism and about Tzelem Elokim, like you're talking about, because to Jewish people, every life does matter. Every life matters for us. But at the same time, some of those personalities who are mixed in there are also dangerously toxic, anti-Semitic as well. So maybe let's talk about those two separately. First on the personal level, who are some of the people that you're meeting? Let people know who's out there, who you have that dialogue with.
Yeah. So it's everybody from neighbors, right here in Skokie, we have African-American neighbors right here in Timber Ridge. I got the pleasure to meet some of our neighbors over the last couple of years, actually through a unfortunate incident where some people had a sign that said Black Lives Matter in the front yard, and it kept getting vandalized. It kept getting knocked down or written on or smashed. And they were very upset, just as I would be upset if I had an Israeli flag or something on my property and someone came on my property and tore it down again and again. So I got to know her name is Pat, and I got to know Pat. And we started a dialogue, and at times it's been very, cordial and sweet, and she has kids and I have kids. And it's like, really, we can just connect on a lot of very human things. And at times it's been painful, hearing about her experience of going to what I call the Shabbos park, right? And on a Shabbos, and how that feels for her, that she's the only Black person. There's all these, people who she's, white people, Jewish people. And, it's complicated. And like the last guest was saying, Rabbi Seitner, listening and really listening and listening deeply. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, but being committed to listening and committed to being in the conversation. I've learned a lot. I think she's learned a lot. So I think just starting with neighbors, colleagues, that's where it begins, on the grassroots. And then I've had the sort of getting to know a lot of faith leaders, on the South Side, on the West Side. Pastor Chris Harris is a great friend of the Jewish people in the state of Israel, who also is a great activist on behalf of his community. And speaking with him, being in relationship with him, we went down to his center in Bronzeville. I mean, it's an amazing story, by the way, what's happening there. This is a pastor on the South Side who dealing with gun violence, right? Horrific gun violence and horrific mental health trauma, because families are, you can imagine what gun violence does to people's, it's unimaginable. He went to Israel and he saw something called the Natal Center in Tel Aviv, which deals with the trauma of people dealing with terrorism, right? What happens after a family is a victim of a terrorist attack? They help people through that. He said, wait, we have trauma right here in Bronzeville on the South Side. So he brought that model from Israel to Bronzeville on the South Side. He brought in the Israelis to come and train community health counselors on Bronzeville. And now they've created this whole Turn Center, which he credits every time he talks about it to the state of Israel and to the Natal Center. It's amazing Kiddush Hashem. It's an amazing thing. And he's doing great work in Bronzeville. So I've gotten to know him. And through him, I've gotten to know a lot of other people as well. I was on a show with him and Pastor James Meeks, who has this 10,000 person church on the South Side of Chicago. He's a Republican, by the way. Right. So you learn things about the community that, sometimes you see the loudest people are oftentimes very extreme, but the balabatim, right? The mainstream is like, they're just regular people just like us. They want good schools for their kids. They want safe neighborhoods. They want to be treated with dignity and respect. And I remember we were talking about policing, because that's been the big, Inyana Dioma. And I said, what do you guys want from police? You hear defund the police, you hear crazy stuff out there. What do you want? And they said, we don't want the police to go away. We need the police. We want to have a relationship with the police. What we want is accountability. We want, if there's a police officer who's got 20 citations for beating people up, we want him to, we want to be able to know that, and there to be some kind of transparency and accountability. We want the police to have mental health counseling. I thought that was so brilliant, right? You're a cop. Imagine the kind of stuff a cop sees. And if, like Dr. Seitner was saying, if you're not processing that right, if you're not dealing with that, it could do terrible things to your mind. So we want them to have mental health training. And they said other things as well, which again, I came in just wanting to listen. I learned so much. And I've also learned that, again, most people, Rov Am, Black Lives Matter, for example, when 99% of Black people say Black Lives Matter, what they mean is, I'm very upset about what happened to George Floyd. I'm scared that might happen to my uncle or my son. The last thing on their mind is the state of Israel, for good or for bad. It's just like not even in the parsha at all. They're talking about things that matter to their lives. So I think like getting to know people, getting to hear their stories, that opens up a lot of doors. And then when you do pick a partner, be careful. In 2016, I wrote an article saying, when the platform came out from the official, organization, the anti-Israel, Israel's genocide, apartheid, whatever, I said, look, I'm not going to partner with them. I can't be in a relationship with someone that calls my people in my state genocidal. That's a lie, and it's disgusting. So I'm just not, so I don't partner with anyone from official Black Lives Matter. But again, that doesn't mean that we can't turn away. Doesn't mean just because someone says something crazy, we have to be careful and not partner with them. But I mean, imagine the Jewish community. Imagine if you said, like the Black community said, well, one Jewish organization is something crazy, so we're just not going to deal with Jews forever. We know how diverse the Jewish community is. We know how there's such a range on everything. And just because one organization says something doesn't mean that the Rov Am feels that way. So I think those are some of the things that I deal with and think about.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, because I think it is important. We all understand in life there are nuances and there are complexities, and being able to get out from the noise, especially from what I hear from people who are on social media and the type of noise
It's very
that's out
toxic.
there,
Yeah.
it's very challenging. So being able to bring it down to that point and distinguish between partners and between messaging is really important. Maybe just to conclude this morning and this whole season, what have you seen as a key to developing and nurturing our love for other Jews, for other people? What's something tangible that people can do to help open our hearts?
Wow. Well, the V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, like if you want to love someone else, kamocha, you have to love yourself. So I think it's very important to start here, to start loving oneself, having compassion and chesed to oneself. And that's a key foundation, I think, of loving others. And then also to see that we all share a common spark, to that I have a Tzelem Elokim inside me. I have a piece of Hashem in me. It's divine, it's beautiful, it can't be tainted. It's Tahora, it's amazing. And so does that person. And so does that person. And so does that person. And to start trying to even just for a moment, to see the world through that lens, the lens of that every single person has a little bit of Hashem inside them. And that can be a powerful way to connect, to identify, and to build real love and trust. If we can start there. It's not easy, not pashut, but that's a starting place.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time this morning. It's always great to see you. Hatzlacha Rabbah in your continued efforts on behalf of the Jewish people, on behalf of the world, to bring more love and to bring more light and understanding and building bridges.
Thank you.
And stay well. Regards to Becca. Thank you.
Thank you. Great to see you. Shakach. Thank you so much.
Have a great week. And thank you to everybody for joining us today. It's been an incredible zchus on behalf of the Kollel to be able to host the amazing guests from across the spectrum of the community here in Chicago and the world, all the different personalities who have helped give us chizuk and perspective in dealing with this unusual time. It's an opportunity to be Maker Tov at this time to our absolutely incredible, fantastic, devoted, sensational, talented administrative team. Mrs. Tracy Schultz from right here in West Rogers Park, who has been, I guess you could say, producing, working behind the scenes to make sure that all the details of this program go off without a hitch, b'siyata d'shmaya, to the extent that we can control the technology. We thank Mrs. Andrea Rasheta, our office manager, for keeping all of the books and everything behind the scenes going. We thank Mrs. Daniela Schwartz, also right here in West Rogers Park, for her unstinting efforts to create constantly new ways to share the messaging of the Kollel and all the programming that we're doing with you in creative, beautiful, eye-catching, and just magnificent ways. So Daniela, for all of her PR work, thank you. Thank you to all of our Chavrei Kollel for building the team and the organization and the movement that we have to share the Torah and the inspiration that we have. And thank you to the Ribbono Shel Olam for giving us this gift and this opportunity. We thank all our lay leaders, our supporters, our board members who have continued to put the gas in the tank to enable us to produce all of this inspiration with all of you. This is a Sunday morning after we finished the Shabbaton in your home, where we had so many people on Friday afternoon and last night for a beautiful Shabbos. We delivered over 80 Shabbos boxes to people across the community of all different neighborhoods and all different types. Thinking about this week of Avos Yisrael and Avos Habrios, what was a better experience than my having the opportunity to go door to door to different families on Friday in the different neighborhoods? Specifically, many of the boxes that I had the chance to deliver were gifts. Specifically, several people gifted to those who have children with special needs and challenges, and how much it opened my heart, and what a great zchus it is for me to be a participant in this. I thank you all for joining. Wish everybody a good day, a good week, Shavua Tov, be Matzliach, and continue to join us, to learn with us. Please God, to continue learning this week. The shiurim are going to continue. Please God, we'll have Mashiach Tzidkenu, but if not, we have Tisha B'Av program that's following the Women's Nili Archekala. Have a great week. Continue to join us. All the best.